At least 9 teenagers are now charged with murder. They're accused of being part of a plot to lure a fellow teenager to a place where someone he knew was waiting with a gun. And all of this was allegedly over a girl. Right now, we know the names of 5 people who are facing charges in this story. And when we were researching the newest names to be added to the list of suspects in this case, we were shocked with what one of the teens now charged with murder had apparently posted on her social media not too long ago. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. I have an update for you today on a story that we have been following out of South Carolina. It is a story of a group of young people who allegedly, according to police, came together to lure a fellow teenager to a place where he would be murdered. And all of this was allegedly over something that I think we can all agree, in the grand scheme of life, does not really matter, and that is teenage romance. This story has become even bigger since our first episode on this case, which was back in June. And it involves the man you see here, Trey Wright. He was just 16 years old. On June 24th, police say they found him with multiple gunshot wounds around 11:30 p.m. along a country road in South Carolina. Before I get to the new suspects in this case and what one of them allegedly posted on Facebook, let's get you caught up to speed on how we got to this point. This is Devan Raper. He is the man who police say fired the bullets that killed Trey Wright. Raper appeared to try to put on this bad boy persona on social media. He has a TikTok that's still public, and you can see some of the pictures like this one here, where he's flipping the bird at the camera, and he has the caption, "I wish we never met. I wish you would have stopped giving me missed signals, but can you stop? Because I'm trying to get to know your friend right now." Now, Trey, it appears, knew his alleged killer. They both followed each other on TikTok, but they were not friends. According to police, they were reportedly at odds over a girl at the time of Trey's murder. Now, it's unclear if this is the girl that they were fighting over. Her name is Gianna Kistenmacher, and she was reportedly Trey Wright's girlfriend. The 17-year-old is charged with orchestrating his murder. The Florence County Sheriff's Office says that Kistenmacher knew that there was a rivalry between Trey Wright and Devan Raper, and deputies say that she drove Raper to meet Wright on the night of his murder, quote, knowing that Raper was armed and that there would be a confrontation for violence likely to lead to death based on statements made in her presence. Now, she was initially facing a charge of accessory before the fact, and she was denied bond at that time, but her charges have been upgraded. She is now facing a charge of murder in connection to the death of Trey Wright, yet she's now out of jail. She was released on bond under strict conditions. Now, Raper is being held without bond. He is the one who allegedly fired the shots in this case. At his first court appearance, he tried to argue for himself in front of the judge. This is how it went down. This video per WBTW.
I did not do none of this. There was 4 more people.
All right, I'm not here to try.
I understand that.
I'm not here to try your case, but you can speak to law enforcement, and you can also talk to your attorney.
Before I get to the new suspects in this case, it's important to know that Raper was known to the criminal justice system. He was arrested in August of last year on a charge of being an accessory after the fact to felony or murder, and he was released from jail in November, and then the charges were dismissed in February of this year, according to WBTW. Now, you heard Raper in that court video claiming that other people were involved in what happened, saying that there were 4 more people that were in the vehicle with him. Now, it's unclear who he specifically is talking about, but this week police arrested 3 more teenagers. Here are their mugshots. Their names: Corinne Belviso, Hunter Kendall, and Kearns. All 3 are now facing charges of murder. Now, it appears Belviso and Kistenmacher were members of the same cheerleading team at a high school in Myrtle Beach. Arrest warrants that we received from the Florence County Sheriff's Office show that these new teenagers to be added to the list of suspects are accused of bringing Raper to the scene knowing that he was armed and knowing there would be a violent confrontation. And Trey Wright was apparently no stranger to these new suspects. And what one of the new suspects posted on social media about Trey Wright really shocked us. Here it is. We found the social media of Corinne Belviso, now facing a charge of murder. On June 25th, which is the day after Trey Wright was killed, this is what she posted on her Facebook page. It is a link to the GoFundMe page for Trey Wright saying, quote, "They've made a GoFundMe to help Trey's family. If you're able to donate, anything will help. Trey was one of my friends. We're heartbroken. To know him was to love him. LLT." That stands for Long Live Trey. That has become a battle cry for people who are remembering him, honoring him, and calling for justice after his death. Before I get back to this episode of On the Case, I need to take a moment and talk about our partner and sponsors at Morgan & Morgan. This is a law firm that is the largest injury law firm in the country. They have more than 1,000 attorneys, and they win a lot. They've recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. Now, even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to start a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you've been injured and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan the QR code on your screen or click the link below. Now, Belviso has a lawyer who is not holding back in saying that she's innocent. He told WPDE that his client is innocent, saying, quote, "It's really simple. She's not guilty of anything. We've hashed through the stories. She's talked with police. I'm shocked she was charged, and I will defend this case with every breath I have. She's not guilty of anything." Belviso and Kearns, 2 of the new teenagers who were just arrested and charged in this case, they have been released from jail. They were granted $20,000 bonds. Hunter Kendall was denied bond, and he is still in jail at the time of this recording. According to WPDE, in South Carolina, 4 other suspects have been arrested and charged with murder in the death of Trey Wright, which brings the number at the time of this recording to 9 people who have been charged in connection to Trey Wright's death. We have reached out to the Florence County Sheriff for the names of these new suspects and information on their arrests. At the time of this recording, they have not gotten back to us. Joining us now from South Carolina to talk about this case is Tyler Bailey, civil rights and criminal defense attorney. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. What do you make? I mean, 9 suspects in this case, all charged with murder in the death of Trey Wright. What stands out to you in just how law enforcement is going about this investigation?
Well, first, just on a human level, it's a tragedy, especially when you have young people involved in gun violence and loss of life like this. And the first thing that went to my head was that this is kind of an unprecedented way to use the hands of one, hands of all jurisprudence, which is something that's used often in South Carolina involving gun crimes or possession of drugs, but I haven't seen it much with murder, especially when you have 9 young people. And it also appears to be a way for the local government and sheriff's office to probably combat youth violence, looking at a way to send a message that, young people and kids, teenagers, school starting back, don't assist people who have firearms and are about to engage in altercation, because you have 9 kids or young adults, some teenagers, some 18 or older, who actually helped the accused get to the victim, and the victim tragically lost his life. So it's really unprecedented on those fronts. And then the bail also seems to be low because these are serious allegations that kids or young people, let me rephrase that, are charged with, but the bond does not seem indicative of the seriousness of the crime, which leads me to believe that this could be a way or a tool to get them all involved in the case by law enforcement and then possibly work out deals south from there.
Yeah, because it's from what we know, several of the suspects have been released on $20,000 bonds. The man, Devan Raper, who is accused of firing the shots, he is still being held without bond. What will prosecutors have to prove in these cases of the associates of the person they say fired the shots? What will they need to prove if they were to take these to trial?
They'll need to prove that the associates knew that the accused was going to the location with the intent to commit murder. murder of somebody. And they're using the fact that they assisted him. They knew that he had a weapon and they knew he was going to the altercation, but they're going to need to prove there was a tent on the front of the associates that this was going to occur, which is tough. Providing assistance, accessory before the fact of the crime is easier to prove than it is actually that they all participated in the murder with the intent, knowing that the accused was going to go there and he was going to commit a murder by shooting the victim who tragically lost his life. And that's a steep hurdle for the prosecution to make here.
Because Gianna Kistenmacher, who is reportedly the girlfriend of the victim, and she was the first co-suspect with Devan Raper who was arrested, and it was believed that she was the one, according to law enforcement, who orchestrated this, knowing that the two of them were at odds, that Devan Raper was armed, and that she was bringing Devan Raper to meet Trey Wright, and then it ends in sadly, Trey Wright's death. And originally she was charged with accessory before the fact, and now she is facing a charge of murder. What is the difference between the two?
Accessory before the fact means that they provided assistance to the defendant or the accused here to further his ability to commit the crime. Accessory after the fact is when they provide assistance afterwards with knowledge. But accessory before the fact means that she knew that he was going to go there and he wanted to, use his firearm to engage in murder or attempted murder or something like that. And she helped him do it by orchestrating the whole thing. Murder, which is a lot of a steeper hurdle, means that she went there and actually helped him commit the murder. It's a little difference. It's a legal distinction. I think that the sheriff in the interview that I saw, he said that he was very methodical in speaking with the solicitor's office and investigators before upping the charges to murder for her as well. Accessory before the fact to me seems easier. And it also is something that this case could be pled down to maybe if they dismiss the murder charges later.
Because you think of some of the other people involved, and we don't know, we have arrest warrants that kind of say the same thing as Gianna Kistenmacher's arrest warrant, where it was they knew, according to this, that Devan Raper had a gun and he was going to go to Trey Wright, and they knew that there was going to be an altercation that was going to lead to his death. And then there's also reportedly video of what happened, which that hasn't been released to the public as of yet. But in the case of Devan Raper, and he's accused of being the person who fires the shots, how much do the other cases, the 8 other people, does their case kind of hinge on Devan Raper? Because let's just say if he was able to be found not guilty in this for whatever reason, how does that impact then the other people who have been charged with murder if they're not the ones who were accused of firing the shots?
It'll be nearly impossible to charge the others with murder if the accused is acquitted at trial or if this case is dismissed. I mean, the evidence seems to be pretty strong that, he fired a gun and he killed the victim here. But the other ones are being charged from what we can see based on the warrants right now for providing the assistance and helping orchestrate the murder. If he's acquitted, then there's no way that his associates or his friends or whatever you want to call them who are also charged with murder could be charged, because the main culprit, the shooter, would be found not guilty, acquitted, or have the charges dismissed.
At the beginning, you said kind of I forget what particular the phrase was, but when as someone who knows the law in South Carolina, how does this, and I know in a lot of ways this is unprecedented, but what are some of the similar situations you've seen where it has been a case like this has been prosecuted in the way that the Florence County prosecutors and the sheriff's office seem to be going about it?
Hands of one, hands of all typically goes like this. You'll have somebody, let's say, driving a car and there's marijuana in the car. The officers pull over the driver of the vehicle, and everybody in the car is charged with possession with marijuana with the intent to distribute or trafficking marijuana. It can also be used with gun possession, where there's a gun in the vehicle and somebody is not authorized to be carrying the gun in the vehicle, and everybody's charged with being in possession of the firearm. This is different. This right here is a murder that's committed, and they're saying the hands of the one shooter who committed the murder is sufficient to be the hands of all of his associates who helped orchestrate the murder. That's why it seems to be unprecedented, where this appears to be more of a case of providing assistance before committing the crime for the actual accused to commit the murder, who's the shooter, versus all of them being there. We don't know what all the evidence they have. It could be text messages. We could see the video. We don't know how they all assisted in committing the murder. I do think that law enforcement probably would not want to overcharge in a situation where they risk the chances of an acquittal, not being able to prosecute all of these individuals, and there's still more who could be charged. So there must have been some strong things that we, as members of the public, do not know about. And I do think I think the sheriff is looking at the public policy here and trying to curb this type of youth violence, whether it's social media, text messages, different communications, and getting or luring somebody to a place where a violent crime occurs by charging everybody with the severe, charge of murder here versus something a little lighter, like accessory before the fact.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely sends a message because, I mean, just on a human level, to know that all of this was allegedly over some teenage girl dispute, I mean, it's just not worth it. And you think of the lives that have been impacted. Certainly, Trey Wright was somebody who was beloved, and he lost his life. He was just 16 years old. There are some suspects who are under the age of 18, but it appears, have been charged as adults. How does South Carolina typically go about cases where you have very serious charges, but people who are technically minors under the law?
In a case like this, where you have allegations of murder, it's all but certain they'll be charged as an adult. The prosecutor's office has discretion to charge minors as in juvenile proceedings, which are handled in family court, versus as adults, which are handled in our court of general sessions, which is felony criminal court. And here, because of the allegations of murder, the loss of life, and what they did in going about orchestrating the crime, the prosecutor's office, in conjunction with the sheriff, elected to charge everybody as adults here, which seems appropriate given the nature and loss of life.
How common is it that you see someone charged with murder? We were talking about bond a little bit earlier, but to get specifically into it, for someone to have that murder charge in South Carolina, but be released on a $20,000 bond?
Not common at all. That's why it seems like this is almost, I'm not going to say slap on the wrist, but a show of force, but not the actions that follow it regarding the bond doesn't seem appropriate. $20,000 bond on murder charge usually does not happen. You'll have bond being denied more frequently, maybe after several bond hearings. If the trial is taking longer to get to a jury, you may have situations where they may grant bond or set a speedy trial with things like a GPS monitoring, home confinement, periodic check-ins. But $20,000 bond is something that you see on drug cases, maybe even some bad DUIs, not on a murder charge. So I do understand that the others who are also accused of or being charged with murder here may have not been the shooter, but they've been charged with murder. And so just given the seriousness of the allegations, chance of being a flight risk, just because of the nature of the allegations, I know they're young, I'm pretty sure they have parental involvement. You would still think it would be more appropriate to have a bond that seemed more in line with the charges that they're accused of.
Because if even someone doesn't have great financial means and you're facing a $20,000 bond, I mean, what would you typically, I mean, the least amount that you would have to post to be able to get out of jail if you're facing that type of bond?
I mean, with a 10% surety bond, you can get a bondsman to put up, 7%. The family could put up 3%. So you're looking at that 10% of 20,000. I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that's 2,000 and another 10% of that, 200. You can have a situation where somebody puts up $600, and then the bondsman puts up the rest, and then they have payment plans on it. So a $20,000 bond is really nothing for a murder charge. It's easy for somebody to take care of that. Something more appropriate could have been, a $250,000 bond if you're going to give one, just because their age that they are. And even then, in most counties, people, the phrase of catch and release is something that's big here, where people are accused of violent crimes, but they're out on bond quickly. And that's something that seems to be the case here, because you have murder charges, although they're young, although they may have not been the shooter, the state elected to charge them with that high crime. So it's a little odd here, and we'll see what that looks like regarding the local community, how they feel about it moving forward.
Yeah, I know that there was, just from some local media reports, some criticism of the bonds being so low. I don't know if you saw it. Devan Raper, who's the man accused of firing the bullets, at his first court appearance, he started pleading his case in front of the judge. It was just an arraignment. The judge told him to stop. He had said something like, oh, there were other people there, and the judge said, please talk to your lawyer. Generally speaking, why is it that it is not a good idea and it's not advisable for a suspect to do that in open court?
Early on in the way our South Carolina criminal cases go, you'll have a bond hearing, which is the first time that accused is before a judge. And that's simply to look at what type of bond should be set. It's not to go into the underlying allegations of the crime. And then the accused has the right to remain silent. Anything that could be used against him could be used at the trial of this case. And a bond hearing is not the time for the defendant to start testifying about the facts of it. Everything that he said then is on the record about there being others there, or it wasn't like how it's being portrayed to be, and that could be used by the prosecution later. And the judge was trying to caution him of that, to listen to your lawyer, let your lawyer do the talking, because you could jeopardize your case, even if it's something that you think is insignificant that's said before a judge, when you're testifying under oath and you don't even know what's all in discovery yet. So it's always advisable for, accused to listen to the counsel of their lawyers, only talk when and if you take the stand later on, and let your lawyer do the talking for you.
Yeah, and I'm sure a good amount of heartburn for a defense attorney if you see a client start speaking in the middle of a bond hearing, like what we saw Devan Raper do, knowing that all these other cases hinge in a lot of ways on how his case would play out. What does the timeline look like if these were to keep going forward? What does the timeline look like for how this could be prosecuted?
It's going to take some time. We have a lot of co-defendants who are charged with murder. Of course, the shooter is actually the number one. If this was a organized criminal case, who they're going to be looking to be prosecuted, but everybody else is also charged. There could be more evidence that's collected. You could have plea deals with the associates who may agree to plead to something less, with the condition that they will provide assistance to the government and prosecuting the shooter. So a timeline on this case, easily I could see 2 years before this case going to trial, if it ever goes to trial. This could be a situation, just given their age, there's several options that they could have, with whether it's a lengthy probation, charges being reduced to lower offenses of some of them, depending on what role they played. But I doubt that the state is going to want to make this case seem like a slap on the wrist. I think the $20,000 bond that they got early on the case hurts them later on, because the public is not going to be pleased if this is just something that seemed to be an overreach by the government, where they charged them with murder, slapped them with a $20,000 bond, and then later gave them probation of like 4 years. That seems like a injustice for the loss of a life, if they're going to make charges like this so early in the case.
And what is the process typically? I mean, you as a criminal defense attorney, if you have a client who says, hey, look, if one of these teenagers is ready for a plea deal, they want this to go away, what is the process of how that could play out?
The prosecution is going to be the one who controls it. Criminal defense attorneys are defense for a reason. They don't control everything regarding scheduling, regarding when all the discovery is ready for the defense lawyer to review. Even if you have somebody who's rushing there and saying they're ready to plea out, things are going to be done on the prosecution's timeline. Now, that doesn't mean it could drag on and on forever. 5-6 years or something of that nature is a very long time. And the accused does have a right to demand a speedy trial if they believe they are ready to go to trial quickly. But ultimately, there's a timeline of, they're out on bond. The lawyers are working with the state in reviewing and receiving all the evidence, going over that evidence with your client, and then entering plea negotiations from there. They can reach out to see if the prosecution is ready to talk, or the prosecution will reach out on their own time. And if a deal can't be worked out, then you prepare for trial.
All right, and we'll see how this case plays out. Definitely, 9 people at this point. We'll see if any more people are charged. Tyler Bailey, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.